Yeah, AJ Mahar here. On the topic of what's really happening for people with codependency that maybe a lot of people with codependency haven't yet caught up to or don't realize. People, like on the video I did yesterday, September 23rd, 2020, you can't put your shoes into the feet of a borderline, which is really all about how people with BPD can't take in your logic. They can't hear the logic. They don't have any emotional intelligence or self from which to have the emotional. They have arrested emotional development, so they're not in any emotionally mature place. They might have a strong intellect, but they don't have emotional intelligence, and they're very emotionally immature. So they can't meet you where you are with your logic if you're a person with codependency. But here's the way it twists the other way. People with BPD have so much emotion. They make a lot of decisions based on their magical thinking. This is very true. They can be self-sabotaging decisions that they make, knowingly or unknowingly, repetition compulsion cycles with impulsivity. The thing about it is, what I learned from all the comments on that video last night, and people, especially one that got kind of rude at one point, where they said it would go against all their core beliefs or their belief system to not be rescuing and helping this person with BPD no matter what. Like I've heard other people with codependency say, or comments here, and maybe the odd client over the years say, well, but I wouldn't be being me if I didn't help rescue him or her. That statement doesn't have the meaning that a lot of people really believe it does. Why? Because as a codependent, you don't really fully know yourself. Maybe you're aware of that now, maybe you haven't been aware of that, but you wouldn't be being you? What does that really mean? Examine that. It will help you. So it's learned helplessness on the part of people with codependency, externalizing out their control needs from something that happened in the family of origin that wounded you onto the person with BPD. Next thing you know, person with BPD's got all control over your life, so it goes for a lot of people the codependent narrative, and you can't help it, and how dare they? Well, you need to take personal responsibility for yourself. So what is this video to follow the other video about how people with BPD can't meet you in your logic? Well, guess what? You're not helping yourself out, and you don't know what to do in terms of in response to the person with BPD's magical thinking, which is all about feeling, and they feel way too much, right? That's a core aspect of people with BPD suffering, is feeling way too much and not knowing the framework of what they're feeling. They might feel a lot of anxiety, they might feel a lot of anger, they might feel a lot of terror inside, and then whatever they externalize or don't, you don't know what's going on for them. You know, you haven't been there. I have. And that's not me going whoopee me, because so what, right? It's better that you haven't been there. But people with codependency, you are not in touch enough with your own emotions or your own self, more to the point. So though you have this logic that you try to apply and help people with BPD with and externalize out control in a codependent way, what a lot of people with codependency don't realize is that you don't have as much emotional intelligence as you need to be able to be aware of your feelings so that you can take action on how you're feeling, on how you're being hurt and worse, and get out of the relationship. Because once you kind of know what's going on, or that somebody has BPD, or this looks like cluster B, or you've done a lot of research, how can you explain to yourself why you're still there? Because now everything that's happening to you that you didn't understand before, you have a framework of reference to understand somewhat, logically, but not yet emotionally. And now you're in collusion with them. You're complicit with the way that they're treating you. Not that it isn't their responsibility, it is, but they can't take it. But more to the point, people with codependency need to take their responsibility today, right now, as soon as you can. The reality that you can't change these people, that you're externalizing out your own needs and often the woundedness of your core woundedness of your inner child onto the person with BPD. So people with codependency are often not in their emotional landscape enough. You are everything you feel or comes to the surface for you that you feel is revolving around the borderline. Well, not giving borderlines a pass for what they do or how they hurt people, but more to the point, people with codependency need to see that for what that is. You might know better now, so it's time for you to do better. And what does that mean? You're now in a collusive kind of complicity with the person with BPD who keeps hurting you, this dynamic that keeps going on. You're still maybe trying to rescue, etc., but it's not working. And you're actually dealing with, a lot of people with codependency don't realize it yet because you're not going into your own emotions. You're still tied up in externalizing out and trying to rescue the borderline instead of yourself. So people with codependency have this often totally negated emotional landscape. You know you hurt. You know they've hurt you. You know they keep hurting you. And you know you want to help them and rescue them at the cost of yourself even, whether you know that or not. But you see, once you know better, then everything that is happening to you from a borderline or even a narcissist, you're allowing it. There's where your core responsibility is to you. But why do so many people with codependency not get that yet, or not get that for years painfully, really sadly, is because you're still so focused on the borderline. And then people end up giving the person with BPD way more power. People with BPD don't have power. I mean, if they had power, if they had emotional intelligence, if they had more skill, if they weren't drowning in their past adverse childhood experience, they wouldn't be doing any of what they're doing, which is not to excuse it. So people with codependency need to think about your own emotional, not think about, you need to get feeling your emotional landscape. You need to get with what's happening inside of you, not the externalized focus out onto the borderline. Because this is the way that people with codependency abandon themselves, re-abandon themselves, ignore themselves, and then go, but the borderline did this and the borderline did that. Well, okay, but like once you know that, then you're allowing them to continue to do it. That's your responsibility right there. You need to stop that. You need to go, hey, this isn't working. I need to go. And then deal with all the pain and the horrific, really, ruminating and everything that happens with the love addiction that so often is what codependents are going through in these relationships, among other things. So what about you? What about you learning how to take agency over yourself instead of externalizing it out on somebody with BP or NPD and then thinking they have so much power because look how they're wounding you? Well, yeah, but once you know, you're allowing them to still wound you. Please really hear that. And so many people will say and have said in comments on the channel, it would be against my belief system to not help this person. Because, what if the worst happens to them? That's an overextension of your dysfunctional relationship to and with yourself. You don't even know who you are enough. You don't even know what wounded you in your childhood. Often people with codependency don't. But you're going to rescue someone else. It doesn't work that way. People with codependency really need to take responsibility. You have the logic going on that people with BPD don't. People with BPD are often very much almost always affected by overwhelming emotions, feeling way too much, and not knowing how to cope with it, or even why they're feeling a lot of what they're feeling. But codependents negate their feelings, externalize stuff out onto the borderline, try to rescue and help them because you think that's how they're going to help you. This is, in codependency, very close and overlapping to what people with BP are doing, but not the same. But you're trying to take an experience you had in your childhood that might not be in your conscious mind yet, of how your inner child was wounded, and you're trying to help this other person now so they'll turn around to help you with your woundedness and your wounded inner child and whatever happened to you in your family of origin that may well be shoved down into your unconscious. So there's no altruism in codependency. And this idea, as I've heard before and seen before in comments on the channel, people say, well, I just wouldn't be being me if I didn't, put on the Superman cape and try to rescue them. Every person on this planet whether they can step up to it or not has personal responsibility. Has to either exercise the agency that they have over themselves, work on themselves, change, heal, and work on their own recovery, or not. And often people with BPD choose or not, and people with codependency stay in there and keep trying to help, and you keep getting hurt more and more, but now you're aware of it, and you're allowing it, and you're still not with your own emotions, and you're still not with your own, because you had to evacuate your own emotions. Something in childhood happened. You evacuated your own emotions, and you became an overgiver, a people pleaser, a rescuer, the codependent hero, whatever role, because you are not looking at the pain that you have deep down inside that you need to heal. So that is firstly and foremostly the way out of these cluster B relationships. It's not dealing with the cluster B. It's not rescuing the cluster B. It's leaving the relationship, or if you've been left, it's letting them be gone and stay gone, and dealing with all that pain that comes up, which I know is incredible. I've been through it. I've been on both sides of this. I was with a BPD, NPD, alcoholic, who I got hurt a lot by, and I was in a codependent role with that person. And then I would have to do my own recovery for 18 months after that. And that was back 2004 to 2006. I've had 2 exes with quiet BPD, and one ended with her taking her life. And, well, I still grieve that, etc. The point is, I couldn't have stopped that. And any codependent who thinks they can stop a borderline from doing anything, let alone even that most ultimate horrific act of not being here anymore, you're deluding yourself. You are so focused outside yourself. You are so over anything that would be a modicum of a healthy boundary or limit. And it is never your fault what that person with BPD does. That's where people have got something intermingled in their codependency from the unconscious about something very up close and personal that happened to you in your childhood. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but it was a huge thing when you were a child. So people with codependency say, this goes against my belief system. This goes against, I wouldn't be being me if I didn't do, overextend, help, try to rescue that person with BPD. And then the side effect of that is that person with BPD becomes more and more and more powerful to the codependent, which is then resented, and which then makes you feel more and more helpless, and you're not in your own emotional landscape. You've evacuated, you've abandoned yourself, and it goes back to something that you experienced in childhood. So it's time for people with codependency to really realize this, and it might not be a popular message, and I mean it with all care, compassion, and respect. I'm here to keep it real, to help people heal. And I'm out here to work with you in the healing and recovery journey from codependency and cluster B relationships, and to really get that work done, because it is the deeper level of what the codependent needs to know and find out in their own healing and recovery journey that is going to set you free from everything that is agonizing and unbearably painful right now that you are still externalizing out onto the cluster B that really isn't about the cluster B. But then there's also healing to do from those relationships. But it's a multi-layered kind of approach that I take with people, because there's more than one thing going on there. So if you're codependent, excuse me, and you've caught yourself with, well, this goes against my core beliefs, or this would be me not being me. Do you really even know yourself, first and foremostly? Because lots of people with codependency don't. Not down to the core, not the way that you should, not the way that I know myself after BPD recovery and codependency recovery and other types of adverse childhood experience recovery. And I'm not here to say, oh, so I'm all this and you're not. No, that's not the point. Codependency is very painful, and I think people don't take it seriously enough. Because, when I recovered from BPD, and when I had to further that journey of recovery of codependency over some years after I recovered from BPD, if I actually sit and think for a minute about which was more painful, it was darn close. So maybe codependency was a little less painful in recovery than BPD. Just a little less. But you see, take your codependency seriously and learn more about what it is and get into a healing and recovery journey. Because if you're staying with that person with BPD and you're still externalizing, and you might be aware of what you're doing or not, You're colluding with them now when you know better. And when you know better, it behooves you to do better. For you, not for them. You don't have the power and control over them that you've been externalizing out instead of giving to yourself. So I hope that was helpful to somebody out there. People with codependency really, not all, but many are still in stages of needing to really wake up. And maybe I'll have another video coming on what the comments were on the last video, where people went and how extreme it got. And this is all because people with codependency have a dysfunctional relationship to and with self, have the false self aspect, and don't understand what's going on in your own, in people with codependency that don't understand what's going on. Many don't understand what's going on in your own emotional landscape. So is today going to be the day when you pick you over the borderline or the narcissist? Is today going to be the day when you realize your complicity and collusion with the borderline, now that you know what they are or what their issues are, or the narcissist? Or are you still going to allow them to treat you the way that they treat you? Because now you're allowing it. You need to get conscious about that. And you need to know that the pain that awaits you is yours, and it's yours from childhood. And you need to take that healing and recovery journey. Stop abandoning yourself for the borderline and then thinking they have so much power to hurt you, and then it's all... People with BPD don't have power. They don't. But so many people with codependency just... I wouldn't be being me. It's against my belief system to not... No, that's morality. That's you're covering your denial with morality. Not going to help the borderline, and it's not going to help the codependent. Take care.